Hello, friends. This is an addendum to the first German video. First, I want to make an attachment or a second thought about that movie, Tony Erdmann, as to why the father always have makeup on his face, painted face, and fake teeth. The notion of it is that is the predator, the unknown alien, that is a chameleon, meaningly he changes color based on the situation and the circumstances and the events or the circumstances at hand. It also denotes that him coloring himself, coloring his face, and being a teacher in school sometimes, that he teaches people, he influences their mind. The coloring of the face means anonymous. The man or that creature, Tony Erdmann, is anonymous. You Germans will never know who he is. And up until now, the Mongols, when they came to the Middle East, the horrors and bloodletting of the Mongols that was committed by the Mongols in the Middle East. And eventually, not all of them, but some of them wore the mask of Islam for a number of reasons. One is to avoid retaliation for Baghdad after the Muslims began, defeated them in a series of battles, starting with the Spring of Goliath. So they avoided that punishment or retaliation. Two, they began to be more effective being anonymous. Anonymous, that is, that you do not know who they are. And here is the salient point. That is, it's been 1,000 years since the Mongols and the Hulagu and came into the Middle East and committed their massacres, and they wore the mask of Islam. And 1,000 years later until now, Muslims have very vague idea about them or what happened to them or who they are. They're very much present. Not all of them, I must admit. Some generations, later generations, basically dissolved in the local population, such as India, Afghanistan, Khawarizm, or Iran, or Syria, or they dissolved basically. But there is still that core rulers of Genghis Khan or Temujin and his son Hulagu and them, who they are, they're still there. And they, of course, done a recurrent manifestation. They recruit newer people. I'm not giving them more credit than they deserve because they're marauding tribes that basically killed and maimed. And mainly their main prey is civilians, similar to the communism movement. It's no different. So that's what I'm going to try to say. Now, the point of the movie is that the man, the father, is really anonymous. You will not know him. Neither did the Muslims know, or the Arabs, or the Turks, or the Persians know the personality of the makers of the Mongol movement. We know a little bit better about communism, but here's how it goes. There is, of course, a lot of, quite few manifestations around this joint, which is Earth really, and there is a tripod, and that's of the regime in China, regime in Iran, and regime in Russia. You may find China a little bit perplexing that your mind doesn't start analyzing them or jumping to conclusions or trying to define who they are, because China was always that far-flung place in Islam. It used to be during the birth of Islam and the mission of the Prophet. They used it to denote like the distance, like in today's terms, dig a hole to China, right? Or in today's term, you have to like travel to the moon or Mars to get it. That's how far things are. It used to be that as such, used as to denote the distant place which has life in it or something of the sort. That's it. These are the tripods, and the Chinese regime from its inception in 1911, 9/11, remember 9/11, 1911? They're related, believe it or not. All these 9/11 thing, it's related, interrelated, whether it's in March 11 in Spain or here and there. There is something to that number that those mysterious people use for some reason. It must be the birth date of somebody, or you know, or the symbol of something. I don't know what it is. Islam has nothing to do with it, and all those people. A lot of people know that fact by now. But that's the tripod of modern order, right? You know, those people who are sitting atop of the platform on this tripod of the Iran's regime, of the Russian regime, of the Chinese regime, are the same who made the Mongols, or who made communism, or who made or who established or founded the Iran's revolution. They call it Islamic, of course. Guess what? And so on and so on. I found out that Masonry, Freemasonry, or Masonic society, a lot of people look at it as the maker of these events or revolutions. That's not the case. With all good you know, intents and purposes and evidence, I found them to be a tool, really similar to the tribes of the Mongols, or communist conscripts, and so on and so forth. Eventually, they were done away with when time came about, and so on. And that's what I found. That's what I found it to be. So, but this tripod is not the only thing that's going on. There are smaller satellites, of course, for this tripod. This like giant creature walking on three legs. You know, it's a small creature, but walking on this giant, sitting atop of this giant tripod of Iran's regime, of Russia's regime, of China's regime. Now, China's, you don't have to go like dig up intelligence archive or whatnot. All you have to do is see how the West is being gutted, in the United States in particular, and Western Europe for that matter, being gutted literally, and its parts and hard work and invention and so on being transferred to China. Believe it or not, if this was not one of the tripod of what they call, those who term themselves as New World Order, that wouldn't have happened. So that's the tripod. And, you know, back to Tony Erdmann, him not being known, you know, that's what it is, him not being known. It's that simple. And you will not know him, similar to Islam not knowing who the leader and the core establishment of the Mongols are. We have very vague idea about communism because of modern day communications and ability to transmit information and so on. But then we were deceived by Stalin. You know, once, you know, we were deceived by Stalin, people to have like confused opinion and notions of communism. No. From its inception until now, communism is led by a creed of brothers, band of brothers, if you will. That's it. Has not changed, will not change. The only one I'm doubtful of is really Gorbachev. But then again, you never know, right? It may all be part of this big game that is going on. Those people, those creatures are in Germany, and, you know, they're doing what they're doing to German people. It is horrific to say so. Now, some of you may protest and say, well, look, you're living in the olden days. Germany, you said, have been around for thousands of years, and now suddenly it's being destroyed and morphed and transformed into something else altogether. But isn't change necessary for the development and advancement of a human race? And my retort to that is yes, I will agree with you 100%. And if you say so, you're preaching to the choir. I am an advocate of change, and I am an advocate of human moving forward and becoming, moving up to higher grounds and so on. But the argument is this: from the evidence I am seeing, what's happening is not transformation into a better place or elevation into a higher world of thinking and mind and soul and so on, or the well-being, the purpose, that sinister purpose is not the well-being of mankind. The evidence that I am looking at and I'm seeing is this. is that whether, let's be specific about Germany in particular, and the Middle East in particular, in these two. The Middle East is very hard because Islam as a religion is very strong rooted in the mind and soul and the family and so on. That's why these people were never able to change or modify their behavior based on the predator's requirements and demands, right? So they're kept as down, and wars and famine and poverty for a long time, ever since the failure of their leadership and their society in general. However, the family remains. The family in a Muslim family is very strong. Islam is very strong on ground level, like the brick level. The family and the individual, those who are faithful, are very faithful. It's not easy. They're not easily dissuaded from being adherent to their religion and so on. I have heard a joke. When I left Syria in 1980, I came to France on my way to the United States. So I lingered around for a few months, and then I moved to Spain. I lingered around for a few months. Now, in Syrian circles or social circles of Syrians who were late arrivals, because 1980 was also, there was an upheaval of a terrorist entity that is made by unknown people, unknown creatures, mainly the regime in Syria, called the Muslim Brotherhood. They were an extension of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, which was made by unknowns, right? They're anything but Muslims, and they hate Islam. So there were a lot of people leaving the country, and I was one of them, not because I had anything to do with it, but my father was basically concerned about my well-being. They were arresting there were mass disappearances and incarcerations and abductions and so on. So he was concerned, supposedly, he was concerned about my well-being, and he sent me out of the country so I won't be one of those who disappeared and vanished in gulags and so on of the Syrian regime. That was in 1979, 1980. This is well known. You're probably not aware of it, but it's there, and they destroyed an entire city called Hama. So in France, I heard some of those Syrians narrate a joke, and the joke goes like this: that the modern people came to educate those dumb shit Syrian people. And Syrian people, believe me, those Arabs are not dumb shits. We all know that, yeah? And they showed them a movie, about modern age and so on, and how the West is like advancing in technology and the freedom of the woman, and they of course put those beautiful Western, blonde, blue-eyed, German Scandinavian people, and the subject of this movie, of course, of this video, right? And then these people were mesmerized, like they were looking and their jaws agape, right? They were agape, their jaws dropped and so on, seeing all these, sophisticated world and so on. And then once the movie was over, people started chanting praise, may peace be upon our prophet and so on. So the gist of it was, although they saw that the West is advancing, they went, that's how their mind is so backward, supposedly. They went, it's a joke, of course, this is a joke, that's a cruel joke that is meant to portray the Syrians and the Arabs as, they're stuck in their religion and engraved in religion and they cannot leave it. But it's a cruel joke, and it never happened, really. I've been in the movies in Syria so many times. Used to be I go every time now and then, and I never heard anybody speaking religious language after the movie or anything else, right? Now later, in 2017, so 40 years later, I went back visit in Syria, right? And I heard the same joke. Believe me, I heard the same joke. And I didn't say anything about it, but I scratched my head a little bit. Now I know it has origins, sinister origins, because it meant to teach some people that those people are so dumb that no matter how much you do for them, no matter how much you try to educate them, they will always still backward. That is what I am talking about in moving forward. That's a lie. People would like to move forward. People always move forward. We are in the modern age, not because people were dumb, because people were smart and brought us to this age. Now those creatures, those aliens that are destroying the world, in Germany and Middle East for that matter, they are pretending that this world is their making. That's not true. They are actually taken this world and its civilization, the civilization of this world, its knowledge, its science, they stole it and made it hostage to them, and a vehicle to destroy the others. And that's what it is now. Here's how there is some evidence to what I'm telling you. Here, when I arrived in the United States, the first thing that came, that attracted my attention is, and I worked in black neighborhoods, right? So I was a little bit type of, bro and so on and shade, and I still use that language between now and then because it sounds like cool. I lived among them, and some of my personality was imprinted when I was working in the slums of the United States, in Houston, in Texas in particular. I noticed the situation of the black community, African American community in the United States is so horrific, that when I remembered our poverty back home in Syria and so on, we were meant to be as such, actually, but that religion which really lingered and clung to our psyche, in our mind, kept us family, kept us trying to be idealist and be legitimate and so on and so forth. We didn't lose our humanity because we were pressured by poverty and wars and so on, and famine. Like in the early 1900s, there was a famine in Syria, engineered famine, similar to the Holodomor in Ukraine, that basically killed so many million. Syria is not 21 million like they say now. It's supposed to have been much more than that. That was around World War I, actually. And it was an engineered famine. So now I look at those people and I was horrified. The pressure on them was so horrific and severe that they no longer have family. I heard like 60% of their children do not know their fathers. And mothers in general, they depend on social welfare, and where you go in their neighborhoods, there's like drugs and murder and robberies, and it's agonizing to look at those people and not feel something for humanity, for your humanity. That said, and you would think, their leaders should lead them into a better life. It turns out that their leaders do not care about them. In fact, they're using them. In fact, they're employed to keep them down and keep them into this hellacious, tragic situation and tragic life that they live. And there's no future for them. If order breaks down in the United States, blacks will perish in mass. That's how it is. Guns and violence and so on. It's not the guns that is causing all their problems. It's the poverty and privileged life they live, and their leaders are guilty as hell. But the subject is, and then I looked if there is a concern by the government about their well-being, and the media and the establishment, they would at least allow them to better their life. But then you look at their literature, at their their songs and their lyrics and their rap and their hip hop and so on, and all you would see, which is propagated by the media of this country, you would see that the lyrics and the music and the culture they promote and they drop like hydrogen bombs on top of those people, right, is meant to further degrade their psyche and their ethics and their social values, and it's meant to basically obliterate them. Now, I am guilty of it as well. I like the tunes. I don't like the lyrics. I listen to it sometimes, like some of it, not all of it. I listen to it sometimes, but the lyrics itself, it is so troubling. It is so troubling that whatever left of life, of humanity in those people is being systematically destroyed, and they're being kept for their votes in order to marshal their votes by some hidden hand. That's the very same creature that is destroying Germany, and the very same creature that is destroying the Middle East and the world for that matter. That's one of my evidence that the idea is not to move humans forward and to liberate them from, say, intolerant or unhealthy past or so. I've seen movies I watched movies that I borrowed from the library. They accused the Germans of things. When I was trying to learn German, I kept watching movies because that's one way of getting help in, improving your speech. I watched some movies that are disturbing. They accuse the German of things that are really disturbing. Not that some of the stuff that they accuse the Germans of that are not there, but they're very rare. That's like more the abnormal, so antisocial, covetous and antisocial behavior and so on. But when they try to show you that, and whoever is watching that, if they're not aware and careful of ingesting the falsehood that is presented and fed by the movie or whatever book you're reading or whatever channel of information that you're ingesting, you would think that all Germany is like that. That's not the case. I went to Germany and visited Germany. I stayed there for a few weeks, and I can tell you that it's not what I saw. And I met with people from Germany here. They're not what they're talking about. And I have no doubt, because people of such low quality as they make an assumption about them are not so productive as to become like a destination, coveted destination to go to, either from the Middle East or anywhere else. If you ask people, where do you want to immigrate? They try to immigrate to the United States first. They don't go to China or Germany or England, and sometimes France, right? But those three places, Germany in particular, I would say it's equal in importance and interest of destination as to the United States itself, because it offers such like wealth and such as stability and such as safety and so on and so forth. But that's what I'm talking about. The destruction of the morals and the destruction of the family is not really exactly meant to move people from a morbid past into a better future. No, it is meant to animalize human. It's meant to put them in a cage. It's meant to make them slaves of this unknown who comes from the East, right? So that's what's going on now. Yeah, I'm a proponent of change, but I'm not a proponent of demoralizing and degrading humanity to such a point that they become nothing but animals. So I read Nietzsche, downgoing and the spirit and so on. He declares war on what makes man a human being and what makes man civilized and what guarantees the values of the family and the respect of a human being and says the sanctity of human being and the family and so on. He declares war on that. What he wants by, what is he alluding to by downgoing is really one becomes animal, basic and simple, in their behavior, in their physical behavior or social behavior or sexual behavior or whatever it is. And once man becomes such a creature, void of spirit, void of ethics, void of values, man will do anything, and they become easy. They become more of a machine to be utilized and so on. Be careful when you read that sicko. So that's what I'm talking about here. So now I want to tell you something. I read the history of that monster. And I call it monster with all my heart, and I call it a dark movement that destroyed Germany, that Nazism. Mongolism, the movement of Genghis Khan, the Iran's revolution, China's revolution, Russian regime, and smaller regimes in Syria and here and there, right? Lebanon or Jordan or whatever, I don't want to go into a bout of providing details or whatnot here, but Nazism is the creation of that alien creature, Tony Erdmann, right, or whoever came from the East, right? Those Mongols that they didn't just wear the mask of Islam and Christianity. Listen to this. They wore the mask of the locals, like the colors and whites and dark and so on, and they blended with society. Yeah, and now they look like you in Germany. You don't know who they are. Nobody will know who they are. But I have a very good idea. What I'm saying is Nazism, uh, communism, Iran's revolution, Muslim Brotherhood, communism in South America, and the assassination of JFK and his brother RFK, which denoted the decapitation of the US government. And before that, what happened in England in the 1700s and so on is the work of the same people, the same creatures. Period. They're no different. Anything about that. I'm not. This is not a metaphoric comparison, contrasting each other. Like each movement to the other. No. I really mean it. The same group of alien beings, creatures. They look like humans. Well, they're humans really, but their psyche is so changed and deranged and so isolated that right now, although they can talk your language, they can speak your language, they can intermarry with you, they can deal with you, they can eat with the same food and so on. But the makeup of their psyche is now different, similar to us being different from other animals. Like if you consider us to be gorillas, then they're chimpanzees, right? The only difference is that we're not that different where we cannot interact and interbreed anymore, but we're still close. However, that's how different we are from those people. That's why they're able to do to everybody else what they do to what they usually do. The horror and the tragic, the predation, that predation type. Something similar to cannibalism, right? That's what they are. So now let me go back to that monster that you called Hitler. I don't need to discuss him much. I have seen a documentary about him calling his very close associate, Himmler. He said, as he sat across the table eating pork, I said to myself, like he was talking to one of his SS guards, right, in that wolf's lair, that couldn't help but see that the pig is eating its brother. Notice how he had like double personality, that onion notation to himself, similar to Shrek, if you will, that he described his very loyal man. And that man, Himmler, Göring, right? He described Göring, I'm sorry, as when he was eating the pig, that he was eating its brother. I'm not making this up. Go check it out. I'm not going to tell you where, but I'm sure your fox will know where it is. That's what he called him. And that man, when he was in that farce called Nuremberg trial, he declared that he was still loyal to the man, not knowing that he felt about him this way. And he was just basically using him. Now, there are three, aside from that, there are 3 points in very stark and salient points in his career as the despot of Germany. The first one I could cite is when in Normandy, the forces of the Allies came on board or made a landing in Normandy. Rommel made with singular accuracy that this is it, and he said like an army of children can overtake these defenses, and he knew that's where it was coming. But then they tried to. He said it was going to come in Calais, right? But Hitler, being so much in charge, he and his Egyptian brother, Rudolf Hess, he's Egyptian. That's where he was born and was raised, in the 1800s among his peers in there. Very same aliens in there. They couldn't wake him up so he can order the Panzer Division to be moved south. And that was detrimental to the war. To me, he's, what the heck are you doing? Here are millions of people perishing in Germany and here and there, and you just want to go to sleep and not worry about where the landing is going to come. The second thing he did is when the German forces went on blitzkrieg into Soviet territory, right? Basically, communism was collapsing, and I read that, and I've seen documentaries that hundreds of thousands of Russian and Soviet conscripts were basically surrendered. They weren't very much impressed with communism and what Stalin and Hitler and his brother Lenin were doing, really. And they knew there is darkness in their future. Their country is no longer healthy. They knew that. People know that. Nobody can misunderstand that fact when things begin to happen in their country and they don't know what it is. No, they do. And Hitler was very alarmed. He was so alarmed that he declared war on the United States. Why? Because he wants the West to come from Western Europe, land in Western Europe, open a new front, so he would relieve the pressure on his brother Stalin, the communism, right? So, and now the German Wehrmacht or armed forces weren't going to be focusing on communism in Russia by itself. Now they're busy fighting two fronts, hence giving chance for Stalin to recover, and recovery through Iran, of course. As you all know, United States and the West supplied the Soviet Union through Iran. Germans do know that, actually. I got this from Germans, this piece or this fact. And that's very questionable. Now you may say, the first one was a coincidence. Oh, but about the second one, the second point, which is really declaring war on the United States. He's dumb shit. He's only a corporal. He made a mistake, maybe twice, detrimental, fatal mistakes. Well, there's a third one. Like they say, one time is okay, mistake. 2 times, you're overdoing it. Third time, you're definitely guilty. When the German forces arrived to about 19 miles from Moscow, Hitler called two different field marshals who entered, talked to him or met with him at different times, not together. He asked the first one, I don't recall their names. What should he do? He says straightforward. He didn't even care to discuss the point. Seize Moscow, he told him. Then he calls another field marshal, not on the same day probably, I don't know, within a while. And he meets with him and he asks him for an advice. And I'm sure Germany has that history. And he asked him what to do. He says, seize Moscow, right? Instead, he orders the forces, the Wehrmacht, as I know from history, to go south after the oil fields. Hence, calling the survival for his brother Stalin. And the rest is history. I have no doubt what this creature is, that Tony Erdmann that came from Vienna. And it's not by himself. You guys may think he's all by himself. It's not by himself. No. A man by himself cannot do all that stuff. He can start like that, but it takes time, right? And so it is. That's what it is. Now, another point here about the ignorance of us here, Americans, and in the West. Americans, white America, has heritage from Europe. Well, sure, they're not from the United States or Native Americans or Asia. They come from Northwestern Europe, right? There are a lot of Arabs, of course. How do they come? By way of, they come here as Italians, they come here as Spanish, they come here as sometimes French and so on. So aside from Northwestern European presence in the Western Hemisphere or in the Americas, it's really divided between Northwestern Europeans and Arabs. But now let's focus on the United States, which really went to war with Germany in World War II, World War I too. And there was so much slaughter and killing between the two United States forces and the German forces. But here's what flabbergasts me, what shocks me. I read here, based on certain statistics, that a lot of people claim themselves to be from English heritage. Some claim to be themselves from Irish, and some have German heritage. But what is the percentage of heritage, like which one has? It turns out that 80% of white America claims German heritage. Next to them are Irish, and then afterwards everybody else, like English, like Swedish, and so on, or Scandinavian for that matter. And then, of course, you got the Italians and French and Spanish, Southern Europe. And here's where it hit me, and I talked to white people here about it. In World War II, on the Western Front, It was a German killing German. That slaughterhouse that was taking place in the west of Europe was German killing German. Basic and simple. For what and for whom? All right. And that's Germany. I wait for Germany sometimes, like for what I hear them talk about them and gloat about the horror and what it is subject to. It's like the snake swallowing a prey, but the prey has been suffering, and while it's moving down the esophagus, they down the tube of the snake toward the stomach where it will be digested finally. That takes what? The prey dies as soon as it suffocates, really, as soon as it's in the it's on the way in this esophagus, because there's no air. It suffocates and dies, and then digestion comes later. That python, right? That anaconda swallowing that. But now, if I want to liken Germany to the prey, it has been under swallowing process for the past, I don't know, 100 years, or maybe so, I don't know, since World War I, and it's been suffering. It's been suffering. Now, like the whole purpose of this video is to really show that while Syrian people think that Germany is nice, like prosperous, and so on and so forth, they don't know what they were subject to in the last century. A lot of people don't know what happened there. All they know is that there was World War II. But what happened, the atrocities and the horror, and that they're still under duress and being swallowed as we speak. Muslims were suffered more, actually, and they're being slowly swallowed for 1,000 years, for 1,400 years, for that matter. My dear friends, I'm not saying this because I am racist. I am a Muslim man by religion, by birth. To me, everybody is really the same. But I do believe in diversity, meaningly, there are people who advocate people to marry each other until there is one race on the planet. That's when we lose our diversity and become unable to continue to exist as a species, as a humanity. That's when we lose our health. That's when we lose our mind. That's when we lose our soul, and we become basically a consuming type animal. I pray that we don't have to go that route, even though I could clearly see that the Putins and their establishment are trying to head that way and trying to remove this humanity from its humanity. Please, as German citizen, whoever is listening to this, consider what's going on in Ukraine, and do not wait for anybody to defend you or those modern communists to make a comeback again, even though they're all over Western Europe. But they need to be on top of your country formally in order for them to begin the annihilation. They tried that in January 6th in the United States and had that Trump stayed in the White House and sheared off the Constitution. Slaughter will happen here now, similar to the SS murdering the stormtroopers in Germany, or communist Stalin and Lenin murdering those who shouldered the revolutions in the communist revolution in Russia and here and there. And in Iran, the first year alone, or the first 2 years, after the return of that creature called Khomeini, he sheared off all those who shouldered the revolutions, hundreds of thousands of them. And then Iran has been killed and get killed ever since, and similar to the Syrian regime and here and there. So if you allow those Russian conscripts to be on your border or closer to you, this time around, there will not be destruction of the Soviet Union and them withdrawing, at least formally, This time they will be on top of you, and your end will probably come faster. I pray for Germany. I have a lot of respect for those Germans and for their efficiency in engineering and their history in science, and as a society, and as like people who are aloof and they try to fulfill their own needs instead of begging others and so on. And I'm not excluding others, such as Scandinavians, such as Scots and English and so on. No, 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 no. Similar. I am proud of having multiracial heritage. I consider myself an Arab through the father's side, and that's what I pride myself on. But I know there's multi-races in me, and I'm sure in Western Europe there's such thing. But I pray they survive, and I pray that those Putins, those dark Putins, the monsters, do not make it to their country like they did in the last century. Have a nice day, my friends.